Our next speaker is Anatolii Tokmancev. His speech entitled Jehovah's Witnesses in Armenia, Nationalism in a Strictly Non-Nationalist Sect. Anatolii Tokmancev is a PhD student at the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Cultures at the University of California, Los Angeles. In his research, he focuses on contemporary religious nationalism in the Republic of Armenia and the Armenian diaspora. He had received his bachelor's in history from the Siberian Federal University in Russia. In 2011, he obtained his master's from the Department of Cultural Anthropology at the European University at St. Petersburg, Russia. In his thesis, he analyzed the perception of Armenian Apostolic Church and the Russian Orthodox Church in the Armenian community of St. Petersburg. From 2011 to 2012, he spent 9 months in Yerevan conducting participant observation in the Russian community and in the parish of Russian Orthodox Church in Kanaker. Anatolii presented the results of his extensive fieldwork at a number of international conferences in Russia, Armenia, and the US. He's one of the contributors to the recently published book, Armenian Christianity Today.
Can you hear me? Awesome. So, I would like to start with thanking Hrant Foundation for inviting me to present the results of my work here, and the Gulbenkian Foundation, whose financial support made my research possible. And I'm going to change a little bit. So I would, in my presentation, I would like to, let's say, contest or focus on 2 common assumptions that, based on the presentations yesterday and the 2 previous speakers today, I think are common in when it comes to evaluating the role of religion in identity. And the first assumption is that identity is permanently salient and important in people's life, at least in the short run. And a second assumption is that whatever the government or other actors, political actors, impose on a group, on people, is automatically accepted without any changes, like as we saw with examples of Milad. So the Milad is imposing, or the government was imposing the identity. And in my presentation, I want to show how this doesn't work as we sometimes take it for granted. So in my presentation, I'm going to talk about Jehovah's Witnesses in Armenia, and my presentation is based on data I collected through participant observation in Armenian-speaking and Russian-speaking communities of Jehovah's Witnesses in Yerevan in 2015. And during my fieldwork, I was trying to understand the role of nationalism and ethnicity of Armenians in Jehovah's Witnesses' everyday life. As previous speakers already was saying, the dominant nationalist discourse in Armenia and in Armenian diaspora often prescribes that all Armenians be members of the Armenian Apostolic Church. So much so that the governmental statistical organizations automatically enlist all Armenians that are not members of evangelical or Catholic groups automatically in the group of the Armenian Apostolic members. Which means the equation of Armenianness and being a member of the church. Unsurprisingly, the affiliation with other religious communities is regarded as a direct damage of to Armenianness that leads to assimilation and extinction of Armenian people in the long run. In this context, it's not surprising that why Jehovah's Witnesses in Armenia, which is after the Armenian Apostolic Church the most conspicuous public organization, is castigated and stigmatized. In Armenia, the Jehovah's Witnesses have become a target for hostility by the media, politicians, and ordinary people, regardless of their economic, social, or educational background. Some of the negative qualities that Armenians associate with Jehovah's Witnesses include their unwillingness to celebrate public holidays, so no Christmas, no Zatik, nothing. Their deleterious influence on family, so they steal people from families, they don't allow their kids communicate with their grandparents and things like that, and also refusal to defend motherland and respect nationalist symbols like flag or anthem of the Republic of Armenia. Yet it is clear that the high level of antagonism and hostility is incongruent and incommensurable with the little amount of knowledge that people actually have about this organization. Often people are unable to explain the reasons why their attitude towards Jehovah's Witnesses is so negative. Today there are about 11,000 Jehovah's Witnesses in Armenia, and the official places of worship are called Kingdom Hall or Tagavorutan Srah. And their official ones are located in Yerevan. However, other cities, towns, and villages also host smaller communities of Jehovah's Witnesses that are officially not registered because it's difficult and they're not that numerous. Linguistically, they're organized in Russian-speaking and Armenian-speaking groups. There's also one English-speaking group that was recently formed. And these groups further are split in congregations. So Russian-speaking congregations, there are 2 Russian-speaking congregations and 7 Armenian-speaking congregations in Yerevan. And each congregation comprises about 150 people who meet in their kingdom hall twice a week. The normal way to refer to a Jehovah's Witness in good standing is a publisher, or Hrant, which reflects the fundamental idea. People publish, they spread the word of God, the word of truth, to people in the world. And this is the most important activity for Jehovah's Witnesses. And it includes door-to-door preaching and spreading out the literature, most importantly 2 magazines, Awake, Zatnatsik, and Watchtower, Ditaran. With regard to nationalism, the official teaching of Jehovah's Witnesses declares ethnic and national differences unimportant. During the meetings, they emphasize their meta-national level and indifference to national cleavages. However, it doesn't mean that in everyday life, the Jehovah's Witnesses do not have space for ethnicity, or in other words, for being Armenian. Before I proceed to analysis, I would like to clarify what I mean by ethnicity. And I'm going to draw a lot on what Professor Toladan and other speakers were talking about yesterday and today. And ethnicity in everyday life is not a thing in the world, is not a tangible entity. It's not a quality that someone possesses. It is rather a perspective on the world, as some sort of a modality of experience through which one may or may not see the world around him or her. In other words, it is a cognitive frame of reference that helps make sense of the social world around a person. As a modality of experience, ethnicity or Armenianness is not continuous but fluctuating. Although we routinely speak of people as having ethnicity, or being ethnic, we could as well talk about people doing ethnicity. In this case, ethnicity manifests itself as a social category to which people can unconsciously ascribe themselves and others and use this category as a lens through which the social world around them is interpreted. These categories are a condensed sum of significations or a folk knowledge that endows a person with meaningful characteristics once this person is placed into a category. For example, imagine that we are in a market, vernissage in Yerevan, and we identify a buyer in front of us as an American. Automatically, we can infer all kinds of information from it. This person has money. This person wants to buy souvenirs, most likely Soviet souvenirs. So by very simple cognitive operation of categorization, we can assign all kinds of meanings to one person, categorization. So in this situation, ascribing a person to category of Americans defines the attitude towards this person and sets the tone to communication. Ethnic frame of reference, or an ethnic set of categories, may include opposing categories, such as ethnic set. It can be Armenians or non-Armenians. It can be also gender sets of categories. When we identify a person as a man or a woman or something else, it can be religion or a class. At any given moment, one of these categories can overshadow ethnic modality of experience. For example, the buyer at the market that I was referring earlier can be identified simply as a woman, which will bring up completely different assumptions and strategies. This means that ethnicity or Armenians as a tool of interpretation of the social reality around a person becomes relevant in some situations and loses its relevance in others. In other words, there are moments when one is Armenian, when one is a woman, or a high schooler. So if we apply this theoretical framework to Jehovah's Witnesses, we can reinterpret the question. So to claim that Jehovah's Witnesses are not Armenian or have lost their Armenianness means to say that they never see themselves or others in ethnic terms, or they always identify as non-Armenians. If this is true, I mean, if what the majority claims about Jehovah's Witnesses are not Armenian, then it means that Jehovah's Witnesses never see the world around them in ethnic terms. They never identify with Armenian group. So the goal of my presentation is to demonstrate that Jehovah's Witnesses in Armenia identify with Armenianness. During my fieldwork, I didn't set any interviews. I didn't want to provide a context within which people would use their Armenianness as a clue or as a lens. You only use those phrases, those random occasions when people would start to interpret the reality around them in terms of ethnicity. So the first situation, one of the male members of the Jehovah's Witnesses community told me this story as we were walking back from the meeting. When the Karabakh War broke out, I took a leave of absence from the university in order to go there, even though I didn't have to since I was a student. Once during the battle, there were 3 of us, and we were in a trench. The Azerbaijanis, launched a grenade at us. Both my comrades died on the spot, while I was not even injured. In 2004, I went back to Karabakh to publish, and we were arrested. The policemen were very rude and aggressive, but when I told them that I had also fought in the war, their attitude changed. Clearly, the speaker shows his alliance with Armenianness here, and he supports the Karabakh War. Since even the idea of fighting and killing is unaccepted in the community of Jehovah's Witnesses, telling me this was quite controversial and risky. However, with this story, he obviously signals that Jehovah's Witnesses are worthy, and they are worthy why? Because they are Armenian, true Armenian, because they fight or fought for independence of Karabakh, and they see Azerbaijanis as enemies. Within the discourse of the Karabakh War, being Armenian and taking pride in defending the nation outweighs the possible condemnation of breaking the rules of the organization. Expressing one's nationalist pride is not possible during meetings in Takavorutyan Sra, in the Kingdom Hall, but it's very common when Jehovah's Witnesses preach in public. Another quote by my informant. When we publish, people are extremely rude. They say, "You sold your souls to Americans." I say, "Look around. What language are the street signs written in?" English. So, who sold their souls? You or us? So negative attitude towards the West, and the US in particular, is common in Armenian society, and Jehovah's Witnesses are not an exception. Similar contexts activate ethnic frame of reference, where us includes Armenians, and others, them, includes Americans. Both the larger Armenian society and Jehovah's Witnesses see the association with Americanness as offensive stigma, while being perceived as an Armenian is greatly desired. This attitude is not uncommon amongst Jehovah's Witnesses in Armenia. However, they never express it directly. They take pride in being bearers of Armenian culture and share fundamental principles of Armenianness that are ascribed by the dominant nationalist discourse. Consider this quote. This woman is pointing at a man who is wearing beach shorts in the center of Yerevan. And she's saying, A real Armenian man would never wear shorts in public, ever. But now, because of the influence of the American idea, I do what I want, they're adopting and practicing this habit that is alien to Armenian culture. Obvious respect for the certain attributes of the Armenian culture, not our culture, not in Yerevan, Armenian culture. And the urge to protect it from the deleterious influence of the West is equally common for the Jehovah's Witnesses and the majority. This situation could easily be interpreted exclusively through the lens of gender. She could say, oh man, these days are not that they used to be. They wear shorts and they wouldn't wear shorts 20 years ago. No. She interprets the situation through the ethnic lens. This man is not just a man and she's not just a woman. He is an Armenian man and she's an Armenian woman. So what happens is that she considers this situation through gender and ethnic frames of reference, where the informant sees herself as an Armenian woman talking about Armenian man. The last Armenian language also bears symbolic nationalist meaning for Jehovah's Witnesses. It undoubtedly remains a marker of their belongingness to the Armenian ethnic group, not a simple tool of communication. And speaking Armenian is frequently an object of nationalist pride. This woman who was speaking Russian to me, actually, she said, at the beginning, right after we had come to Yerevan from Baku, I didn't speak Armenian at all, and people started laughing at me. They asked me if I was Russian, but I would always say, I am Armenian. I made it my goal to learn Armenian, and kamats, I learned it. For this Jehovah's Witness, Armenian language is not a tool of communication. It is rather a symbolic value, the sign of belongingness to Armenian people. In addition, being Armenian is apparently is of a very high value for her. The short analysis of everyday situations from the lives of Armenian Jehovah's Witnesses shows how, regardless of their own claims and the claims of majority, the Jehovah's Witnesses have no relation with Armenianness. Ethnicity still plays a very important role and very often becomes a lens through which Jehovah's Witnesses interpret the situations around them. They accept nearly all categories. They accept nearly all aspects of the category Armenians, such as gender roles, language, independence, and frequently use Armenianness as a tool of making sense of the social world around them. With our theoretical scheme that I offered earlier, we can try to explain why do people hate them? Why do people dislike Jehovah's Witnesses so much? And Jehovah's Witnesses and the mainstream society see the affiliation with the religious institutions, and Arda and Christopher were talking about it earlier, very differently. The majority of the society conflates the ethnic and religious categories, and therefore interprets being a Jehovah's Witness as being an ethnic category, which means that very often people see us, Armenians, versus them, Jehovah's Witnesses. So the Jehovah's Witnesses in this situation becomes an ethnic category. It's almost like being a Russian or a Turk or an American. That's why they see them fundamentally different. While for Jehovah's Witnesses, being a Jehovah's Witness is a part of a religious set of a category, which means that they see us as Jehovah's Witnesses and them as atheists, members of the Armenian Apostolic Church, or Catholics, or other members of other religious organizations. Unlike for a majority, for Jehovah's Witnesses, the religious category Jehovah's Witness doesn't coincide with ethnic category of Armenians. That's why they can switch in between the categories. They can be Jehovah's Witnesses, members of religious organization, in one set of situations, and be Armenians in other sets of situations. The process of switching between these frames is unconscious, and that is why Jehovah's Witnesses genuinely believe that ethnicity is not important in their lives, although often their identification with Armenians provides the cognitive scheme for interpretation of the social reality around them. This proves that for analytical purposes, we cannot take the lay categories or categories of practices for granted. These categories, rooted in folk perceptions and policies, are polysemantic and contradictory, and that is why we cannot use them as a tool of analysis, but we can and should use them as a target of our analysis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anatolii.